Emma Carter noticed Daniel Hayes on a rainy Thursday evening in Seattle, though she did not know then how important that moment would become. The cafe near Pine Street had been her quiet escape for nearly a year. Every Thursday after work, she sat by the same window with a cup of chamomile tea and her laptop open, pretending to work while mostly watching the world move outside. It was her way of feeling present without truly participating. After her divorce 2 years earlier, Emma had learned to enjoy calm routines. They were safe, predictable. No surprises meant no heartbreak. That evening, rain tapped steadily against the glass, and the cafe buzzed with soft conversations and the smell of roasted coffee beans. Emma barely looked up when the door opened, but a warm laugh caught her attention. A man stood at the counter smiling as he spoke with the barista, joking kindly about needing an extra refill because the weather demanded it. His tone was easy and genuine, not loud or attention-seeking. People nearby smiled without realizing it. Emma glanced back at her screen, but curiosity pulled her eyes toward him again. He looked around for a seat, noticing the crowded tables until his gaze landed on the empty chair across from her. He hesitated politely before walking over. "Is this seat taken?" he asked. Emma almost said yes out of habit. She valued her space, and strangers usually stayed strangers. But something about his calm presence made refusal feel unnecessary. She shook her head. "No, go ahead." He thanked her and sat down, placing a sketchbook beside his coffee. For several minutes, they worked in silence. Emma expected the usual quiet distance people kept in public spaces. But eventually, he spoke again. "I think this is the only cafe in Seattle where people actually look relaxed," he said lightly. Emma smiled despite herself. "That's probably because of the rain. No one feels guilty sitting still when the weather looks like that." He laughed softly. "Fair point. I'm Daniel, by the way, Emma." The introduction felt simple, but it opened the door to conversation. They talked casually at first about the unpredictable weather, busy work schedules, and how cities sometimes felt crowded yet lonely at the same time. Daniel explained that he was an architect who designed community spaces and believed buildings should make people feel welcome. Emma shared that she worked as a manuscript editor, helping authors shape their stories. "Must be interesting," Daniel said. "Reading so many different lives." "It is," she replied. "Though sometimes it feels easier helping fictional people solve problems than dealing with real ones." He nodded, as if he understood more than she had said aloud. Time passed quickly, and Emma was surprised when the barista announced closing time. She realized she had talked more in one evening than she had in weeks. As they gathered their things, Daniel smiled warmly. "Same time next Thursday?" he asked casually. Emma hesitated only for a moment before answering. "I'm usually here." That became the beginning of something neither planned. Over the next several weeks, Thursdays turned into an unspoken tradition. They never officially scheduled meetings, yet both arrived at nearly the same time. Conversations grew longer and more personal. Daniel spoke about growing up in Portland and moving to Seattle for work. Emma shared small pieces of her life, her love for quiet mornings, old bookstores, and long walks near the waterfront. What surprised her most was how easy it felt. Daniel listened carefully, never interrupting or trying to impress her. He asked thoughtful questions and remembered details, like her favorite author or the way she disliked overly sweet desserts. Around him, Emma felt seen without pressure. Still, she kept emotional distance. She avoided discussing her past marriage in depth, mentioning only that it had ended peacefully but painfully. Daniel never pushed for more, respecting the boundaries she quietly maintained. One evening, while snow threatened outside, Daniel noticed Emma staring at couples walking past the window. "Do you ever miss being part of something bigger?" he asked gently. She considered the question. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but missing something doesn't mean you should go back to it." Daniel nodded thoughtfully, understanding that some answers carried hidden stories. As winter deepened, their connection strengthened in subtle ways. They began sharing small parts of their weekly lives, stressful meetings, funny coworkers, favorite music discoveries. Emma found herself smiling at her phone when Daniel sent a message about a building design or a photo of a sunrise during his morning. The change scared her. She had carefully rebuilt her independence after heartbreak, convincing herself she no longer needed emotional closeness. Yet now she caught herself waiting for Thursdays, planning stories to tell him, wondering what he might think about random moments in her day. One night, a strong storm knocked out the cafe's power. Lights flickered and disappeared, leaving the room glowing only with candles placed on tables. This sudden quiet felt intimate, almost unreal. Customers laughed softly as staff continued serving drinks. Emma laughed too, surprised by how carefree she felt. Daniel watched her with a thoughtful expression. "You look different when you forget to protect yourself," he said gently. The comment caught her off guard. She straightened slightly, unsure whether to feel exposed or understood. "I'm not protecting myself," she replied. Daniel didn't argue. "Okay," he said simply, respecting her response. But his words stayed with her long after she returned home that night. She realized she had been protecting her self-avoiding deep emotions, keeping connections temporary. The realization unsettled her because she wasn't sure she wanted distance anymore. The following week, Emma arrived early, nervous, without understanding why. She replayed conversations in her mind, recognizing how important Daniel had become. She missed him between Thursdays. One evening a week suddenly felt too small to contain what she was beginning to feel. She wondered if he felt it too. When Daniel entered the cafe that night, rain clinging to his coat, relief crossed his face when he saw her waiting. They smiled at each other in a way that felt different, warmer, more aware. After sitting down, he hesitated before speaking. "I almost didn't come tonight," he admitted. Emma's stomach tightened. "Why?" He took a careful breath. "Because I think I'm starting to want more than this, and I don't want to ruin what we already have." His honesty stunned her. She had expected uncertainty, maybe distance, but not openness. Hearing her own unspoken feelings reflected back at her made her heart race. She realized she wanted more conversations, more shared moments, more presence in each other's lives. Yet fear held her back. What if history repeated itself? What if closeness led again to loss? She stared at her tea, gathering courage to answer honestly. Just as she lifted her head to speak, Daniel's phone rang sharply, breaking the fragile moment. He glanced at the screen, and his expression changed instantly from calm to concern. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I have to take this." He stepped outside into the rain, pacing while speaking urgently. Emma waited, telling herself it would only take a minute. She watched through the window as his posture stiffened, his free hand running through his hair. Minutes passed. Customers left one by one. Staff began cleaning tables. Emma checked the door repeatedly, expecting him to return with an explanation or apology. He didn't. After nearly half an hour, uncertainty replaced patience. She packed her things slowly, leaving the cafe alone. The empty chair across from her felt heavier than it should have. Walking home under streetlights reflecting off wet pavement, Emma realized something she could no longer deny. Daniel had become important to her not just as a friend, but as someone who had quietly entered the space she once believed would remain closed forever. And as she reached her apartment door, one question lingered in her mind. Had she waited too long to admit what her heart wanted? Or had something just begun that neither of them was prepared for? Emma tried to convince herself that Daniel's sudden disappearance meant nothing serious. People had emergencies, she reminded herself. Life often interrupted plans without warning. Still, the empty Thursday evening felt strange. She went to the cafe anyway the following week, telling herself she was only keeping her routine, not waiting for anyone. Rain fell lightly outside, and the familiar smell of coffee filled the air. But Daniel's chair remained empty. She checked the door more often than she intended, pretending to read while disappointment slowly settled inside her. When closing time arrived, she left quietly. Realizing how much she had begun to rely on someone she barely knew a few months earlier, days turned into a week, then another. Emma focused on work, editing manuscripts late into the night, trying to silence the growing feeling of absence. She avoided wondering why Daniel had not sent a message. Part of her feared that their connection had meant more to her than it had to him. Another part reminded her that vulnerability always carried uncertainty. She told herself she was fine, yet small things reminded her of the architecture articles he liked. The park bench they once joked about redesigning, even the way strangers laughed in public spaces. On the second Thursday without him, she almost skipped the cafe entirely. Instead, she walked past it and continued toward downtown, deciding she needed a change of scenery. She entered a small, independent bookstore, one of her favorite places, hoping quiet shelves would clear her thoughts. While browsing a display of new releases, she turned a corner and nearly collided with someone, Emma. She looked up quickly. Daniel stood there, holding a book, looking surprised and relieved at the same time. He appeared tired, his usual energy softened by worry. But his smile returned the moment he saw her. "You disappeared," she said before she could stop herself. "I know," he replied gently. "I'm really sorry." They stepped aside to avoid blocking the aisle. Daniel explained that his mother had fallen ill suddenly the night of their last meeting, forcing him to fly to Chicago immediately. The phone call had shaken him, and everything afterward became a blur of hospitals, family decisions, and long nights filled with uncertainty. "She's recovering now," he said. "But it made me realize how fast things can change." Emma felt her frustration melt into understanding. She had imagined many explanations, but none had included something so serious. "You could have told me," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "I wanted to. I just didn't know if I had the right to reach out. I wasn't sure what we meant to each other yet." His honesty surprised her again. Instead of excuses, he offered vulnerability. Emma realized she had been waiting not only for his return, but also for clarity about their connection. "I waited for you," she admitted softly. The words lingered between them, simple but meaningful. Daniel's expression softened, and relief crossed his face as if he had been carrying the same uncertainty. They left the bookstore together, walked into the cool evening air. City lights reflected on damp streets, creating a calm atmosphere that made conversation easier. For the first time, Emma spoke openly about her fears. After her divorce, she had promised herself never to depend emotionally on someone again. Independence felt safer than hope. Daniel listened carefully. He shared his own story and engagement that ended not because of betrayal, but because life goals pulled to people in different directions. Since then, he avoided rushing into relationships, choosing patience over intensity. "I didn't want to lose what we had by asking for more too soon," he said. Emma smiled faintly. "The funny thing is, one evening a week stopped feeling like enough." Daniel laughed softly, the tension finally easing. "I was hoping you'd say that." They agreed to start slowly, without pressure or expectations beyond honesty. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic. It was simply two adults choosing openness after learning from past disappointments. From that point forward, their connection grew naturally. They began meeting outside, Thursdays, morning walks before work, casual dinners, visits to local markets. Emma discovered Daniel's habit of sketching ideas wherever inspiration struck, even on napkins. Daniel learned that Emma loved quiet drives along the coast and collected old hardcover books because she enjoyed imagining their previous owners. Their conversations deepened. They talked about family traditions, personal dreams, and fears about the future. Instead of trying to impress one another, they allowed imperfections to show. Emma admitted she sometimes overthought situations. Daniel confessed he struggled with balancing work and personal life. Each confession created trust rather than distance. One weekend, Daniel invited Emma to a small community event showcasing architectural projects. As he explained designs meant to bring neighborhoods together, Emma saw how passionate he was about creating spaces where people felt connected. Watching him interact with others, she realized she admired not only how he treated her, but also how he treated the world. Later that evening, while walking along the waterfront, Emma felt a calm certainty she had not experienced in years. Being with Daniel did not feel overwhelming or uncertain. It felt steady, I used to think love only happened once, she said thoughtfully. Daniel glanced at her. What changed? You did, she replied honestly. You showed me that feelings can grow again without replacing what came before. Daniel nodded. Maybe love isn't limited. Maybe people just stop believing there's room for more. Their relationship continued to evolve through everyday moments rather than grand gestures. They supported each other during stressful workdays, celebrated small achievements, and learned how to disagree respectfully without fear of losing connection. Emma noticed she laughed more easily now. Daniel noticed she no longer hesitated before sharing her thoughts. Spring arrived, bringing longer days and warmer evenings. One Thursday, they returned to the same cafe where they first met. Sitting by the window again felt symbolic, as if they had completed a quiet circle. Emma watched rain begin to fall outside, reminding her of that first meeting months earlier. The difference now was clear. She no longer felt guarded. She felt present. Daniel sketched absent-mindedly while they talked. After a moment, Emma reached across the table and rested her hand over his. I'm glad you answered that phone call, she said. He looked confused. Really? I thought that moment ruined everything. It didn't, she replied. It showed us how much we mattered to each other. Daniel smiled, understanding her meaning. Sometimes interruptions revealed truths people avoided admitting. They spoke about future plans, not dramatic commitments, but shared possibilities. Trips they might take, projects they wanted to pursue, and ways they could support each other's goals. The conversation felt natural, not forced. Emma realized something important. Love was not about replacing the past or chasing perfection. It was about choosing connection again, even after disappointment. As they left the cafe, rain falling softly around them, Emma felt grateful for the unexpected path that brought Daniel into her life. She understood now that emotional growth often came quietly, through patience and trust rather than dramatic moments. Walking side by side under one umbrella, neither rushed ahead. There was no need. They had learned to appreciate the present instead of fearing the future. Emma looked at Daniel and smiled. You know what I've learned? What? That one chance at happiness is never enough for a lifetime. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. Good, he said, because I plan on making many more memories with you. They continued down the glowing street together. Not certain of every detail ahead, but confident in one thing: their story was no longer about hesitation or mistiming. It was about choosing love again, step by step, proving that hearts could expand, heal, and begin anew whenever people were brave enough to try.